This brings me to today. I have the immense pleasure of introducing Roy. Roy is an independent visual designer working in both graphic design and photography. He holds a master's degree in fine arts in graphic design from the Holy Spirit University in Lebanon. And after years of working as a graphic designer, Roy decided to leave the corporate world and follow his creative path. He uses photography as a tool to access unfamiliar places, challenging himself to connect with strangers while interchangeably observing life from a distance in its form and content. In 2016, Roy was granted the Arab Documentary Photography Programme, supported by the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture, Magnum Foundation, and Prince Claus Fund. And alongside all of this, Roy is also the designer of Dog Food magazine, which is an independent photo magazine combining archival materials mixed with a dash of cynicism. Can relate. And if you haven't already, please go check out Roy's website. You can see his photography and his design work interspersed. I think in addition to this evening's talk, Roy's publication work is really inspiring to anyone who's kind of considering making their own zine or photobook. So check out his website, roisaade.com. And that is me done. I will hand over to you, sir, if I can find my mouse. Done. Okay, I'm going to disappear from view. I just want to remind everyone, I'm going to turn off the chat. So Roy's going to talk for about an hour or so, we'll see. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if at any point anyone has any questions, just hit the Q&A button. If you're on a mobile, just tap your screen and the Q&A button will come up. All right, Roy, over to you.
Thank you very much. Great intro. Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's do this. Okay. Well, I wanna thank first GPP and everyone involved in this. And I want to say that this presentation is basically about photo books and zines. I'm going to be sharing some of my own work and some of the work that I enjoy looking at. Few other things. One of them is that my education, my background in design is from a Western point of view, theory and design. So some of the research and the information I'm gonna be sharing is from that point of view. I understand and think is very, very important that we consider or think and reflect from our region about how we can bring something else to the table and have our own design photography history being written. And that's something I'm very, very interested in, decolonizing design and photography. And I think this presentation could be a starting point of this conversation. And perhaps later on we can, after this, you can email me and have a conversation and start discussing it. So let's start with a small history about zine and design, and then we'll share some of my own work and inspiration. So history of zines. Zines is quite a new idea back to the 30s, unlike magazines that have been around since the 17th century. So a zine or a fanzine is an independent self-published print. It communicates a unique point of view outside the mainstream. The first fanzine is attributed to the science fiction fanzine The Comet, published in 1930 by the Science Correspondent Club in Chicago. Since the beginning of the 20th century, these publications have powered creative movement, divergent ideas, and artistic expression all around the world. That's a cover from The Comet back to 1940. They were very basic, one color zines. In the 60s and 70s, Zines became more outspoken and political. They had literary experimentations. They countercultural ideas and revolution in layout and design. In the mid 70s, we know that the punk rock emerged. It was very much loud and different from what we know. In the late 70s was the birth of the do-it-yourself movement, also pushed the zines uh, to the foreground. Zines became freely available to all by the arrival of cheap photocopying, where you share with your community, they photocopy it and even work on it. Here I'm sharing one from the UK, punk fanzines on your left, and on your right is Gidra, which is an interesting monthly Asian American zine, uh, the self-proclaimed voice of the Asian American movement, was a revolutionary monthly newspaper magazine. With the availability of home digital printing in the 90s, the movements like Riot Girl surged as an underground feminist movement closely tied to punk music, radical politics, and do-it-yourself aesthetics. And here are a few slides from that time. Also very interesting aesthetics, very basic in terms of color and layout, very open and free. This is just for you if you want to do your own zine at home. It's very basic. You can either have a sheet of paper like the one on the left, one big sheet of paper or small, and divide it into four. Fold it into four, and you will have 8 pages. And you just fold it together and become one small mini zine. The other one, which is on your right, is the more common one, which is basically to print on both sides of a sheet of paper and then fold it and combine all the pages together. And here you go, you have a zine. You just need to staple it or other things like threads and wires. Here is, I'm sharing a small video by Void. It's a non-profit organization based in Greece. It focuses on alternative publishing, exhibitions, and education. This is to say that every photographer, I think, can create something like that. It's a good starting point if you have an idea of a project and you start photographing and you want to share it with your friends and community and check how people engage with it, and also as a dummy to think about your layout and your sequence and how the project works. Now I'm gonna share the magazine Dog Food that I worked on between 2015 and 2018. This zine was a photo zine combining archival material mixed with a dash of cynicism and humor. It was a very freeing experience for me because I came from a background of graphic design and editorial design in corporate life, which is very rigid, very based on a grid and these ideas how to design a book or a publication. So with other photographers who were already working on the zine, I joined them and tried to play with the design and play with the elements and the content. So we had a lot of archival ideas or archival materials or ideas, and we played with them. So I had the freedom to create whatever I want with the other photographers. For example, the butterfly black and white um, image on the left is an interview with Rena Effendi, an Azerbaijan photographer, which I love her work. So this was kind of, these three spreads were basically an interview with her we made. And while we were interviewing her, I asked her to write a few things on a piece of paper, and I scanned them right there and start playing with them. And that's basically how these three layouts started. You can see it's a project about butterflies and her dad following um, uh, butterflies in the region, specifically in Azerbaijan. And that's like a lot of collage materials, images over each other. We had Trigger Finger, which is the second spread on top. It's basically the finger of the photographer that they shoot with. We asked them to um, basically ink their finger, and then we scanned it and put it on the paper. Here we have Rena Effendi and BK Deport. Um, one of the articles I like is this one by a friend of mine who has an archival images that go back to Basra, where her dad was born. And she scanned the images and shared it with them, or shared it with me. And I was very happy to design these layouts and also have an idea of a place that is very different today, kind of have a lesson in history. And this was something very exciting to look at images from the past and engage with it. I also created illustrations and collages for the magazine. Like these ones were part of an article that that a Turkish photographer is talking about today, how photographers is something, photography is something used by everyone. And he cynically talk about like you just have to go buy a fancy camera or check your grandfather's camera in Istanbul, or go to the Galata store, or just be like everyone else and photograph dogs so you can make it. That's one of the themes that we keep seeing everywhere. Um, and this is dog food issue 5. Um, I'm gonna show you a video. It was so the magazine was A4. I'm saying was because I used to work on it, but not anymore. Uh, it used to be 72 pages, printed on Enso paper, cheap paper, saddle stitched, which means staple. And these were very interesting articles, some of them related to photographers who passed away, kind of like underdogs, not famous, or um, archival images, articles. I hope you like it. So now I'm gonna go through the history of photo books. Um, in recent years, there has been a focus of attention upon the photo book, a particular kind of photography book, in which images overlap the text, and the joint work of the photographer, editor, and graphic designer helps build the visual narrative that is unprecedented in photographic history. Here, when we talk about photo books, we don't only talk about photography books. We're talking about something that is looked at and approached as a book art by itself, as an object by itself, that has a visual narrative elements, and not only like a photography album. Um, one of the first photo books in that sense was by Walker Evans, American Photographs. The inner book jacket said, the reproductions presented in this book are intended to be looked at in their given sequence. So sequence is very important in photo books because they tell the story or fragments of the story. At a time when books were an afterthought for many artists and photographers, Evans paid close attention to the details. He carefully selected the paper, cover material, typography, and most importantly, the sequential flow of the images. The plates were presented without titles or text on the right-hand pages of the book, with the facing pages remaining blank. Another influencer photographer is Robert Frank, the Americans. Robert Frank was very inspired by Evans and um, was kind of also his mentor who helped him push and go photograph in the region. The book as a whole explores the American people, black and white, military and civilian, urban and rural, poor and middle class. With piercing vision and poetic insight, Frank revealed the politics, alienation, power, and injustice at play just beneath the surface of his adopted country. This is the photo book that redefined what a photo book could be: personal, poetic, real. And here the idea or the notion of personalization of the book, when a book became not only something you document, images you document by looking into the world, but something that is personal, something that you have an idea or message or something about you want to add to it. So it became not only kind of a way like trying to be objective, but also being aware that you're subjective and you're sharing your own ideas. In 1967, new documents created by John Twarkowski. These are three photographers that kind of famous in the Western world and famous everywhere: Diane Arbus, Lee Friedlander, and Gary Winogrand. The first two images on top, the squared ones, are by Diane. And the lower left one is by Lee Friedlander, and the other one, People on the Bench, is by Gary Winogrand, a very iconic one. In the past decade, a new generation of documentary photographers has directed the documentary approach towards more personal ends. Their aim has been not to reform life, but to know it. Their work betrays a sympathy, almost an affection, for the imperfections and frailties of society. They like the real world in spite of its terrors as a source of all wonder and fascination and value, no less precious for being irrational. Something I think very, very, very true to today. So by 2000, the personalization of the book entered the digital world that we're living in. And the photo book in particular exemplifies a trend in photography that began in the 1950s, but has become very pronounced today. Small and self-publishers are pushing this market's boundary, from printers to distributors, to broaden the access and circulation of the published works. An example here, a work that I love and very, very important from Beirut, is the photographic images by Hashim al-Madani, who's from Saida. And since the 50s till the early 2000s, he photographed um, a lot of people in Saida in his studio. And Madani Studio created a site where individuals could act out identities using the conventions of portrait photography with the poses inspired by the desires of the sitters. These photographs reflect not only how people look, but also how they desire to be seen. That's very important, I think. Um, Idea when photographing people and portraits is the idea that it's just not how they look or how they, but how they want to be represented, and that's something to look at more in detail. This book was made by Akram Zaatari, I think, and Mind the Gap. It's 128 pages, 155 photographs. I encourage you to check it out and buy a copy if you like. So, talking about the history, of course, is very important. And now I'm gonna be more technical a bit about how to design a photo book or the elements that you should take into considerations. Design must complement definitely and enhance the photo book message and not overpower its images. It should attract and retain the viewer. So in my design process, I have these key 6 points that I always keep in mind. Research is vital to understand the project and contextualize its subject matter. It can help finding design solutions and fuel for new ideas. Form, be it format, cover, visual elements, paper binding, typography, or layout. Form follows concept, function, and the book's content. Grid creates structure on a page. It helps achieve consistency of elements in layout. Content like essays, forewords, afterwards, captions can add to the diversity of the concept and design related aspects and give context to the project that helps to eliminate story. But again, it depends on your book and what you're trying to say and who you're addressing and what type of photography you're making. Typography is obviously a very important tool to convey the message and getting across a tone and a look and feel that is right to each design. Layout helps to communicate a narrative through the organization and presentation of text and image. A good layout can establish a coherent and clean design for a complex and heavy project. A great photo book must have a theme, an overreaching idea, and it should function in a world of its own. Now I'm gonna talk about a book that I designed, a case study. This is a trilogy called Black Garden, and I was approached by the photographer Jason Eskenazi to design 2 books of the 3 trilogy. I wanted to say that although I'm gonna focus on Black Garden, only the middle book, I wanted to say that because it's important sometimes to think broadly of the future things that you might do, or if it's a trilogy, for example, like this, how the books will work together to unify them, to create a coherent structure, think about the format, the size, the paper, if it's going to be in this book, should it be in the other one, communicate the heaviness of the subject matter, convey, and in this specific one, convey a mythological look and feel. So the Black Garden photo book, this one is, it moves into the mythological world of opposites and duality. That's the synopsis, and concentrates on 3 main themes: subjugation of women, domination over the animal kingdom, and self-destruction through war. So when the photographer approached me, I had to do a lot of research. First, to understand the subjects he's talking about, to read his synopsis, to do my own research, and here I highlighted like keywords that could inspire my design decisions. So, like in his book, he focused on the East-West dichotomy, the conflict and the similarity. Sorry, he talks about Asian world and the modern life, its poetic foundations and cornerstones, darks and light. So, so this in this particular one, we the photographer had been working on his book for a long time, sequencing the images and looking at them. He even had a lot of design ideas, some that we end up using, but some that were not practical, either from a printing point of view, practicality, like accordion book, or other elements that at the end we saw that didn't fit the book. I wanna it's important to say that when you're a designer working with a photographer, or a photographer working with a designer, it's important to have a very wide understanding of what the book is about, how to approach this, and work not as a client, not as a client and designer point of like approach, but more like a collaboration between you. I think the more you're open to ideas and to collaborations, the better outcome you can have. So this is the cover. I just want to say a few things like type inspiration for me was interesting to go and be inspired from Asian word of type of writing. For example, this one is like an Asian practice of carving letters in stones and metal. So that was one of my first and ideas about what type of typography I want to use. This is the cover design. You saw the cover design in the two slides before, but here I'm showing the file that went to the printer, where I explain the elements of the cover. So the cover was a gray board, and rather than printing on a piece of paper and then glue it to the cover, I decided to silk screen on the gray board an image, a close-up image of the photographer. The book title Black Garden had a very specific customized blind debossing. Blind debossing is when you just deboss a paper or anything, and it's called blind because you can't see, there's no foil or color. So I wanted to enhance more the Asian way of carving into a stone. So I created this triangular deboss where it doesn't go flat, but goes in a triangular shape to resemble the chiseled and metal or stone typography. And the frame was from the layout or the analog framing that the photographer used inside the book. I was also blind deboss. Here I'm showing you the book title. These were like 3D rendering to understand how we're gonna create this mold. The brass deboss you can see on the second lower one, that's the brass made customized to create this effect. And these were on the right, the tests we made. We tried with black, we tried with gold, we tried with blind deboss, so many tests. Spreads layout, these are from the inside. In this particular book, the photographs were made with a black frame, in the darkroom. With the photographer made them like that, but then afterwards, when we wanted to put the images on the book, we realized that it's better to create these black frames separately and then add them to the images later on inside the book. So I created this grid to understand how the elements on the spread on the pages will look like, and the dimensions of it, and the ratio compared to the page itself. So here you can see the image grid and the black borders and the framing and the passepartout white, and then see how the final layout looked like. Another one, the book had 9 panoramic horizontal images, and also you should consider that before finishing the layout, and then, oh, you have something missing, and so you have to create all frames and all layout formats into the book. And that's also the final result of the image. Now binding is how you when you combine the papers together and you hold them together in the spine. When we were doing the binding or considering the binding, I started thinking about new ways of creating the binding, especially because the book had kind of 2 powers, and the photographer wanted to create this panoramic in the middle of the book that takes you from one part to another. So I started thinking how I can emphasize this idea, maybe by creating this crazy binding, one side of the two sides of the binding, like east and west. And then I thought, maybe this is more practical to have it 2 books in one. And then this one, I had called them things, e-binding. I was very interested in this one, and we tried it so many times. I traveled to the printer in Istanbul for 4 times, trying to test the bindings, test the paper, test the ink. And this was one of my favorite binding. Sorry. But at the end, we killed it. Um, that's me with the with the with the printing manager, trying to figure out ways to bind this book and create the effect we want. We tried 7 bindings, and at the end, uh, I will show you how it looked at the end. So this is a very nice idea of panoramic image where you put together different images. The photographer had this idea, and I arranged all the images together to match the horizon line, and it's one of my favorites, and it highlights the book in the middle. Um, so what we end up doing in the center of the book is create something we call double gatefold, which is 2 pages that open from the center and then folds again. Like you see here the arrows. There's a panoramic image of people on the sea, and then you open left and right. You have 2 new photos, and open left and right again, and you have this panoramic aligned sea horizon. And this is on the left, the sketch when I was figuring out how to do it. And this is a video that shows a bit book. So the size was 29 by 21. And the other 2 books from the trilogy are, when you put them together, are equal to that size. So he wanted to create a package later on of the trilogy where he can put them and sell them as a package. And I thought that this is an interesting way to put it together. And that's the centerfold, the gatefold. You can see it all on the video, but you get the idea. All right. So editing. Sometimes I join the photographer in editing his book, um, and sometimes the photographer comes to me with a very strict and tight edit, which we visit again, like in the case of Black Garden, where I just gave my ideas and kind of find the best way. So photo editing is about selecting and sequencing a group of images for a project. What makes a successful photo book different from a slideshow of images is creating a visual narrative that carries the reader from the first page to the last. Narrative sequence can be employed to inflict a new meaning into certain images. And intensity can be heightened or tamed, and an overall arc can be created that helps viewers piece together different photographs in a more meaningful way. Editing with others helps finding patterns within and between photographs. It is important to step out of the comfort zone and look at which kind of pictures are not necessary. Trying various sequences helps finding diverse ways of building a narrative by theme, by using pictures to illustrate a preconceived narrative, by form, texture, color, or mood. My tips to help you with editing is print your images, of course, hang them on a wall and engage with them for a while. Pair images and look for similarities, colors, form, content. Reach out for support from your community, for other photographers. Make a dummy book, and don't be afraid to remove images. Another case study or example of a book I'm working on, this one is work in progress, is a book called Le Dernier Arab, or a project called Le Dernier Arab by Samer Maudad. Samer Maudad is one of my favorite photographer from the region, Lebanese photographer. He has a book called Mes Arabi, very interesting, amazing images from around the Middle East, where he photographed all, I think, everywhere, touring the Middle East. So this is still work in progress, so there's nothing final here. But I just wanted to show you an idea where you can play with the edit and design to create something interesting or new. So Samer's idea for this book is that his statement is that you don't need to go and be in war zones like he used to be, and do photojournalistic images and be in the middle of a conflict to create a body of work that can carry important messages. So he has photos where he started shooting from his own house, from his windows, from his house in Paris and not Paris, France and Lebanon, in color. And he wanted to also use images from the past, black and white, from different countries of the Middle East. So my idea was first to create this loud intro of black and white images, spreads full bleed, and then go into something calmer and more personal, which is the color photographs in a smaller size. So the white here, the white you see is just the background. The layout, the pages will be much smaller than the bigger pages. And something I was interested to do and thought maybe it could be a good idea. If you look at the left side with the green lines, the image starts on the left side of one spread and then continues on the next spread, right side. So I cropped the images into two and paste one on the left side on one spread and then on the other spread. And so you don't see the full page, sorry, the full image while looking at the spread. When you turn the page, you see the continuation of this image here. And that was very interesting a practice, because then you start finding similarities and elements that connect from one photo to another. Like here you see the tower, the woman, and then the reflection of the woman on the next spread, and then the tower again, or the mannequin, and half of the other photo here, and then the other half again. And so the book continues like that, the book within a book, and then you go back to uh, loud photojournalistic images, and the same treatment of cropping the images, like the soldiers and the bikers here, and then again the other half of the image. So when considering a book, one of the most important things is to uh, also think about the printing and the technicalities while you're designing a book, because there's a lot of limitations within the printing process that you should consider. So this 3D shows you a bit information about a hardcover, the classical way of making a hardcover book. You have the cover, which is hardcover board. You have the spine, which is what putting what holding the papers together. You have the book signatures, which is all the papers, all the stack of papers in the middle, and where all your images will go and text. The end paper connect the cover to the book block or the book signatures, so it holds the cover with the inside pages. On the right is the page sequence when you're dealing with a hardcover. You have these four orange papers are the end paper. So the first one is a paste down, which is glued to the cover. Usually these end papers are in different texture, uncoated paper to glue and be strong at the beginning. And then you have the half title where the printed material starts. And then same thing at the end. So offset printing is the standard process for producing high volume printing, while digital printing may be offered as an alternative for smaller print runs. Offset printing is the only way to go for higher volume jobs. Digital printing for a smaller, if you want to create a zine or a small quantity. In pre-press, you have proofing and plates. So printing begins with the process of pre-flighting the files. During this pre-press process, the files are checked for adequate bleeds, image resolutions, and so forth. After the proofing phase, digital files are automatically separated by their colors, and each color is later exposed into a coated aluminum plate. Once plates are made, they are sent to the press room where they will be loaded onto plate cylinders on a press. I mean, there's a lot of things to discuss, a lot of important information, which we can't really mention all here, a lot of technicalities, but stuff like paper, you should know the weight of the book, the texture you feel through your fingers, or the contrast your eyes will perceive when looking at the images reproduced, are all highly determined by the paper used. There's different type. There's coated or uncoated paper. There's glossy, matte, color. Signature is a configuration printers use to lay out book pages on a press sheet so that after folding they are in the correct order. So they are you print on a they print on a sheet fed printer, which is a big sheet of paper divided into the pages, and they fold them together to create one signature. Color space CMYK the is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. By mixing the four colors, is varying amounts, million of other shades are produced in the printed material. RGB is more, the screen is RGB, describes the color of images that are viewed on the monitor. These are just a few types of binding you can find. Also, there's a lot of other ones, and this video shows the classical thread binding for hardcovers. I think it's originally from a Coptic binding from Egypt, ancient Egypt. And here are a few examples on the right, like Saade stitch is basically staple, which is the cheapest binding. Soon bound is a very nice type of binding. It's the thread. Perfect bound is like the novels you read. They're usually soft covers and they're just glued without thread, and so forth. From the region, Laura Tantawi has a beautiful book called In the Shadow of the Pyramids. And I didn't design this book, but I wanted to share it with you. A first-person account exploring memory and identity, with images spanning between 2005 and 2014. What began as a look in the mirror to understand the essence of Egyptian identity expanded into an exploration of the trial and tribulations of a turbulent nation. The result is dark, sentimental, and passionate, juxtaposing the innocence of the past with the obscurity of the present. The book is an experience, edited to look like a one-night encounter. A peaceful and tranquil day suddenly turns violent and chaotic. It's claustrophobic until a new dawn rises, and there is hope again. Okay, so moving on to book funding. So self-publishing is a collective effort, and I think more and more self-publishing uh, is becoming the way to go for photographers. You must be prepared to collaborate with individuals that will contribute at specific stages in the publishing process to carry out your vision for the book and help you produce and market it. So here's some ways to fund your books. You can create an online crowdfunding like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It gives photographers the chance to raise funds for a project before they begin production. This means that you can create an account, show people what kind of photography you want to make, give the story behind your project, and ask for the funds to make it. It's a great way to validate and promote your project, and will indicate before you go to print if there are enough people interested in your book or not. Art grants and funds. Certain countries have progressive art policies, which makes photographers eligible for funding. Although the application process can be lengthy, it is worth checking with your local institutions if there are grants or funds you can apply for. Pre-sale is another module. This model is usually hosted on the photographer's own website, and there is no funding goal. The pre-sale model, the audience is informed about the book that is planned to be published via email, newsletters, and social media, and they are given the chance to pre-order the trade editions, which is the main editions, or limited editions online. The funds gathered can be then go towards production costs. Self-funding, investing your own money, if you have it, in your photo book gives you total control over your project. Funding your own project is also a good motivator to continue promoting your book to the best of your ability. To promote your book, these are a few bullet points. You can write a compelling description, cooperate with galleries and museums by content marketing like online publishing, blog, social media, email marketing, book and photography reviews and magazines, media kit, influencers review, send it to people you like or people you know to review your book and promote it. Photography festivals and book fairs, there's plenty of it. Photography festivals and book fairs, too bad now we can't be around a few of them, but I'm sure soon. For a book dummy awards, after you create your dummy, you can participate in these awards. And the book launch. Now I'm gonna share another project, also a work in progress by my partner, my life and creative partner, Tamara Abdul Hadi. Picture an Arab Man is a photo book by photographer Tamara based on the photo series of the same name, photographed between 2009 and 2014. In this book, which includes portraits of Arab men of diverse backgrounds and nationalities, the conceptual aim is first to uncover and break the stereotypes and misrepresentations placed upon the Arab male while providing an alternative visual representation of that identity. And secondly, the series is a celebration of sensual beauty and an unexplored aspect of the Arab men on the cusp of change in a society that reveres an outdated form of hypermasculinity. So me and Tamara work together a lot. And in this specific project, I am playing the role of the designer rather than the photographer. And we wanted to, since this project of Tamara's has been around the world, and a lot of it's known and a lot of people know about it. We wanted to present it in a fresh way in a book form. And so one of the things we discussed and we decided on is to move the format to portraits and create this iconic type of presenting. You can see here two spreads, one that emphasize focus on the face in small, like iconographies, and then when you move to the next page, you see the full image of the full portrait. It also has different layouts. Ones that are more simple. One of them that has, for example, two photos of the same person. This book will come out very soon. We are working on finalizing it now. You can get in touch with Tamara or me for updates and pre-sale soon. I'm gonna finish now by a project that that I conceived, commissioned, and curated recently, my first experience as a curator. I had this idea of creating a project that transcends a kind of beyond a personal idea, and sharing it with other photographers to work on the same idea. And this idea was that in the past year or so, I was questioning more the idea of identity and belonging. And I was very much inspired by Amin Maalouf's book on identity. While I was reading, I read this: for that is a country where you are constantly having to question yourself about your affiliations, your origins, your relationships with the others, and your possible place in the sun and the shade. It's a striking phrase that I couldn't hold to myself. Only I wanted to share with all my colleagues and people from the region, and I wanted to create that collective thinking. So I pitched this idea to a festival in Florence, Middle East festival, who produced this work. This is a collaborative photography project across the MENA region, in which 7 photographers from 7 different cities are brought together to provide a personal visual narrative of their city, offering an alternative narrative to the often negative or geopolitical representation of that city in the media. And my focus was first, and it was first on newspapers, because every time you look at the newspaper or you read any article, there's so much emphasized on a city or a country as by its politics and its geopolitical ideas and events, mostly related to conflict. So I wanted to create something that countered this narrative and give this voice to photographers to kind of reflect on identity and belonging in their own cities. So I ended up publishing, sorry, not publishing. We created an exhibition, and part of the exhibition was these 7 newspapers, 7 looking newspapers, inspired by the newspaper itself. The layout, like you see, is by 7 photographers here. I asked every photographer to share with me on a specific day the newspaper of their city. So, for example, Miriam Boulos from Beirut shared with me L'Orient Le Jour, which is a Beiruti newspaper. And I used this image, a scan or photograph, to place it in my design and kind of hint the newspaper feel, but also not give it as much importance by turning it vertically and become part of the visual form. I also asked them to take a self-portrait, which I used in the print. I'm sharing here a few of them. Here's a spread that shows the cover and the back cover of the newspaper. That's another one from Miriam on a Monday. And so everyone shared with me also kind of like a diary of this specific day, what they were thinking about, and reflection on identity and belonging. This spread is from Zine, from Tehran. Amazing work, and he describes or talk about immigration through the terminal that he used to go to and photograph, and he photographed for this specific day. This is another one from Algiers, and this is from Iraq, Baghdad, and this one from Dubai, and this one is from Turkey, Istanbul, and this one is from Marrakesh. I invite you to go and check the online exhibition on this link. There was a physical exhibition that is still going in Florence, part of the festival. Also the online exhibition that you can check here. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, GPP. This is my email and website. I'm interested in having conversation with photographers. If you have a project you would like to share, or idea, or even books or that inspires you from the Middle East, let's start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't believe that was just over an hour. It felt like 5 minutes. Okay, first question. I'm going to jump in and ask one. Any plans to make a physical print of 7x7?
Yeah, actually, I'm considering that. For now, there's the newspapers, which the only way to get access to is to go to Florence and check the website and get a print copy of the newspapers I design and print. Otherwise, I'm thinking of putting together all the newspapers and maybe, publish it. Let's see. It depends on who's gonna fund, and maybe I will look back at the presentation and consider a few options of.
I would definitely participate in crowdfunding.
Great,
Done. That's one person. Okay, so everyone, if you have any questions, please fire away on the Q&A section. First one from Altamash. So I think funding is going to be a popular question. What are your thoughts on Patreon to raise funds? And in this region in particular, I don't think.
Sorry, can you repeat that in here?
On Patreon to raise funds.
I've heard, I've seen few friends taking it or starting it. I'm not sure about how good it is or how effective. It definitely helps you to produce more, and that's something good. But personally, I'm personally not very interested for the time being.
Yeah, I think for anyone who's looking to crowdfund, I think Kickstarter really has that platform down, and the way that they promote, particularly in photo books and comics as well, the ecosystem they already have is fantastic. Okay, Tam, good question. This was kind of my question as well. So for those of us who are not graphic designers, which might be quite a lot of us, and let's say I'm a photographer and I'm going to come to you. What's the best way for us to look at layout and design, and how do we kind of communicate our message to you in a way that can be understood and then related back into the final design?
The message to me as a designer or as a viewer?
The message as a viewer, I think, yeah.
Well, it's a lot of things. There's no specific way, but what matters the most is the content, obviously. So there's few questions to ask yourself, and if you put these questions together and try to answer them in the most truthful and detailed way, I think you can come up with something. Basically, the book is all the books, photo books are about visual narrative, right? And it's about a specific message you want to share with everyone. So first and foremost, you should question how this message might be seen by others. Do I want them to understand the whole idea? I want it to be loud. I want it to be a very light way of looking at things. Do I want this could affect the format, for example, a big or small. So the design should always follow the content and your intentions. What are these intentions? And you can start by creating a small dummy, share it with your friends, take their opinions. There's no specific way of designing a book. Obviously, there's few technical things you need to know, like you're printing 4 colors, that paper, there's limitations to size. A book with bleed means in the middle there, some part of the photo could go in the gutter. But I think everyone can design their own book if they want, in a basic way. It doesn't need to be anything fancy or anything that. And that's something I also emphasize on when I'm designing a book. I'm not looking into creating visual elements that disturb the book, but something that enhance and support it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so back to crowdfunding. So update. Thank you, Mohammed, for that. So what kind of crowdfunding can work in the GCC? Apparently, Kickstarter and similar websites are not allowed here. I think I'll have to research that, and I'll let you guys know. I'm not sure. Have you crowdfunded many of your projects, right?
No,
Yeah,
not really.
okay. Yeah, I'll do some research for you guys, and I'll pop that in an email. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Okay, so there's a few technical questions. So if you can use the software, maybe not me. What software do you typically use if you're working digitally? So InDesign, etc. And then where do you start with paper as well? Paper choice, and how does that interact with bindings and like how far you can push the project with printing capabilities?
Yeah. So I use InDesign. I mean, this software is made specifically for books, specifically for layouts. And but I think, I mean, I know someone who used Microsoft Word to create his book. You can do that.
Amazing.
And so there's no specific way. You can even create a zine by photocopying your images on the photocopy and then place them in a paper. It all depends on what you're trying to do. In commercial world, when we're talking about offset printing, paper, for example, is something very crucial to that not a lot of people um, consider it when they're printing their books. So there's coated paper and uncoated paper, and both of them has pros and cons. Everything in offset has pros and cons, and it's upon your book and you to make the decision for like what to push more than the other. So paper, I usually go to the printer. For example, in Black Garden case, I visited the printer press few times and looked at few paper stocks and decided on a coated paper that is smooth. There's a big type of paper. Some like uncoated paper can push the ink to inside the paper and creates a bit fuzziness or not as sharp as coated paper. But it also, the advantage of it is that the feel of the paper is very soft and very textured, like you can feel it more. uh, so I mean, you can go with both coated or uncoated. I'm more inclined to use uncoated paper, but most of the time we end up using something that is more sharp and that gives more details in the photos, like coated paper.
Interesting, thank you. And then Fatma was asking in reference to Black Garden, the embossed cover.
Yeah.
So is it a process of like trial and error to find something that matches what you envisage? She said it seems laborious, but definitely paid off in the end for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a bit ridiculous because you push it so much. And first, I had to um, I had to discuss it with the printer and the photographer, and then يعني push the idea so they can try it, because it was a bit expensive to make. So is there a budget for it? Is the printer in its can do such a thing? Should we create it in this way or that way? Is it really does it really pay off? Um, so so in this specific foil, we had to create something customized, so we had to pay more. But I think it's a very nice detail that yani hint what the project is about, and works very well with the images. So it definitely paid off.
Yeah, nice. And then what do you think, Isabella's asking, what do you think is a good number of photos that should be in a photo book? Is there a maximum or minimum number?
Not really. I've seen books with 200 images and ones with like 45. I think something between 45 and 65 is more or less a commercial photo book.
Mm-hmm. And then, so Mo is asking if like an artist and a photographer wanted to hire or commission you to design the book, would you do it? And what would the process be? And kind of, do you have any indication on costs, etc.?
If okay, if I mean, usually photographers approach me to design their books, and we have a long conversation about what the book is about, what's the intention, and a bit more about how many books you want to print, what's your deadline, let's create a time frame. And if I found the book interesting, and that I want to invest my time and ideas in it, we create a small contract or something like that, and we start the conversation more. We discuss all the details of designing a book. I create design, we create dummy. It's a long process. So of course I that's how I make money. I get commissioned. Uh, so yeah, so that's kind of the process. The process, people should know that making photo book is nothing. It's very time consuming. It's nothing
Right.
fast to make. It's a lot of uh, trial and errors, and so it's a long process that we go through and pays off usually. Yeah.
Do you set kind of deadlines for yourself as well, or do you just kind of go with the flow?
Yeah, I mean, creating a time frame is very important, because you can end up with working on one project for a year, and that's not very practical. Like Black Garden and Departure Lounge. These are two books by the American photographer Jason. Took over a year, and it was intense. And I had to travel 4 times to the printer and look at the paper, look at the binding, look at different things, testing the images. So it doesn't have to be so long. It can be made in 3 to 6 months. Depends on how much the photographer is prepared, how much his ideas are put together, and how much tight is the sequence, and if I'm helping with the sequence or not, if if the idea is all there or not.
Nice. And then in terms of cost and stuff as well, like I can see a lot of the attendees are based locally here in the UAE, and I'm not really sure about printing options here, but how have you been with kind of finding affordable, places that can do like small runs of books, or tests and proofs and that kind of stuff to
Yeah.
help you?
Well, I know of GPP, they print stuff. And in terms of, I mean, I usually, so far, most of the books I made are commercial books that goes through offset lithography printing, which is like press, a big press. And when you print there, you have a minimal quantity, because by the time the printer start testing the prints and use paper, you already tried 100 and 200 sheets to start a good sheet, and all these 200s are a waste. So
Right.
so the minimum you can get in a pre-press is something around 400, 500 copies.
Okay.
Um, so and it depends on a lot. And the price depends on the format. You know, if it's an A5, for example, you can print 32 pages on one sheet of paper. On an A4, you can print only, not only, but you can print 16 pages on one sheet of paper. So just a background, the offset is basically a sheet fed. Yani it's a sheet of paper. It's not a roll of paper. It's a sheet of paper where the design is placed. They call them in position. They're placed, and then you print and you fold them. You create a signature. So you know, if it's an A4, will cost much more than an A5, maybe 30% more. If you're using, say, MYK 4 colors, that means 4 plates. That means much more than photographing a black and white or duotone. It can vary from costing you $3 per copy, or like 20, 25, or something around $15 per copy.
Nice.
Depends on all these elements and how much you're printing. The more you print, the less the cost is.
Right. Yeah, the price per item. Yeah. Um, yeah, so a couple of folks have asked, is it preferable to self-publish or approach publishers? You know, what's a good point at which to approach publishers? I feel like this is the big one. Is it better to have the book ready first, or project, you know, digitally, physically? And then also maybe publishers is one thing, and then you've also got, you know, galleries, museums, small independent bookstores that might carry your book, maybe not necessarily with you know, an ISBN number.
You know, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in that. I mean, designer and photographer, and I also struggle, not struggle because haven't really looked deep into that, but I mean, obviously, it's very important to have your project ready before approaching a publisher. Publisher, which here we're talking about big publishers, the ones we know about, like Tidal and others. These are the big commercial publishers. That to work with them, to approach them, is usually a very hard thing to do, because they think in a very like marketing approach. How much audience? What's your audience? How much can it sell? So it all depends on not really your project, specifically if it's coming from the Middle East and a very niche, like a very specific project. But usually you have to create kind of like you have a tight edit. It's better if you have a designed book um, already, and send it to them, either a print or an email, and describe the project with a synopsis and all that. These are the big ones. The more approachable ones are the small publishers, and there's a lot of photographers now that are creating these small publishing houses just to help each other create and distribute their books. These are more يعني approachable and better approached, and or you can self-publish, which is either by, like I said, uh, invest your own money in it, or find funds and stuff like that. Yeah.
Um, where's Altamash's question? I love this. How important is text, and how important is it to handhold your audience as they flip through the pages of your photo book, and kind of explain things clearly, or let the work connect and speak to them?
Yeah. I mean, there's always a debate about that. Um, Personally, for example, in my photography approach, I try to I try as much as I can to share my thoughts visually. That's why it's called visual narrative. Now, there's a lot of different ways to engage between text and image. If you're doing something that looks more like a magazine in a way, in that sense, you need captions and text to go with the photos. If you're creating a book of like portraits like portrait photography, you might want to include who's the person you photographed, or the location and stuff like that. Sometimes it's better to have it on the page itself or at the end of the page. I tend to try to have it when it's possible at the end, and not keep the flow going rather than like interrupt the visual narrative.
Right. Yeah. We're almost done with questions. If anyone has any more, please do send them over. Great question. Just bare bones. What is the cheapest way to make a book? The absolute cheap. What's the paper? Just
A black and white,
black and white.
a black and white um, digital printing, your printer at home.
Yes. Yeah, DIY.
You can
Absolutely.
do it yourself. You can print the photos on an A4, um, on both sides, or two photos on one A4 and fold it, put them together and staple or thread the spine. Very, very easy, very not costly at all.
Yeah. Nice.
The digital printing also is very advanced now. A lot of books are made digitally. You can make that, just that you can do a lot, but you can print 20, 30, 40 with a really like a low cost and share it with your community.
So I guess my last question is probably more about inspiration and layout. So I find myself when I see a photo book and I open it, I'm always wowed by these amazing, like the folds and just the unique ideas people have had on adding, mixed media to books as well. Like it's stunning. Whereas if I was to think about making my own photo book, I would just regress back into a photo on a page. How do people get kind of creative inspiration for design and layout as well?
Yeah, I mean the internet is full of ideas, and you can easily go to different designers pages and see what they're doing, and photographers and books and a library. I get inspired a lot by looking at photo books in a bookstore, or just browsing trillion covers on a website. Yeah, some people go and look for new fashion clothes online. I look for books
Sure.
most of the time. I always use websites. But I mean, the book doesn't have to be complicated, or shouldn't be anyway. If the book or the project flows and works well in a classic way of looking at photo on the right side with the white page next to it. If it works, it works. I mean, a lot of books are made like that, you know, but the design must enhance and support. So if it's overdone, it goes over, it overpowers the design, and by doing so, you would fail to create a book that share your own ideas through your photographs, because will interrupt will interrupt what you're looking at, and will be very loud and noisy. But a lot of times, for example, also design is about problem solving. So you have like this huge panoramic, like a seascape idea, and you want to put it in a book. Okay, how can I do that in the best way to show the whole thing together? All right, I can perhaps fold pages into each other in the middle of the. That's how you do it. It's questions, problems that you try to solve. When there's no a real problem or idea, that you look for a way to present this idea in the best way possible. But portrait images, for example, can be very classical way of looking at books, But details matter. Even the simplest books are the books that you look mostly on its details. If the paper, the cloth, the cover, the type, is it too small? Is it too big? Should I put the photo on the left or the right? Should I put them on next to each other, or should I keep white space more? White space is very important also, as like the negative space plays a very important role in your layout. All these things to consider, page numbers, all the things to consider when you're designing a book.
Yeah, amazing. Right, thank you so much. This was fantastic. We really appreciate it. It's been super eye-opening. Thank you. We've answered everyone's questions, so hopefully everyone leaves satisfied and ready to go. Thank you. This is absolutely fantastic.
I just want to add at the end that really, I mean, my interest in photo books is not only to design them for other people, and I think that there's a lot of potentials in the Middle East, and I think it's time for us to reflect on photography and bookmaking in the region, and have our voice heard, um, and have our own collective entity um, of like approach to photography. So I'm very much interested in all type of photography, mostly, and also definitely documentary photography. I'm interested to see other people's work. I'm interested to see if you have photo books that you like. Please share it with me from the region. Please share it with me. I don't think that there's enough enough platforms highlighting this. That I think we should create this conversation, and create a place for all of us.
Yeah, and GPP would love to be involved in that as well, for sure. Yeah.